Outside of Hitler, I can't think of too many other leaders throughout history who have actually turned their mobs or turned their troops against their own government.
Yes, morning joke. Joke Scarborough. Doing the old Hitler dance because, that's today's Democrat Party. Their incendiary rhetoric finally came to fruition. And now Joe and Mika, they've been given the day off by MSDNC. They're not at work today because the company knows that they are so incredibly irresponsible, so reckless, so hate-filled, so venomous, so incendiary that they best not have them on the television today because, a Democrat, I'm going to call him a Democrat because, well, for a lot of reasons, and we'll get into this, the young man that shot President Trump in the head on Saturday while my best girl and I were down in the waterfront enjoying a cool beverage on a beautiful sunny summer afternoon in Washington, D.C., watching the Potomac River go by and Marine Corps helicopters and all kinds of fun things when we got the news. And I will share with you my tale. My best girl and I, my best girl had an Aperol Spritz. It's one of those orange drinks. It comes in a big wine glass. And I had a cool beer. It was a Kona. It's a Hawaiian brand, although I think Anheuser-Busch bought into it or something like that because they gobble up everything. But never mind that. We were minding our own business and having a nice time. And it's true, one of the Marine One helicopters had just flown over. And first two texts came in, one from my wonderful sister-in-law saying Trump has been shot. And I turned my best girl and I whispered that to her. There were only a few people around us. And then I actually got up and walked over to the outdoor bar, which has two large screen TVs. And I knocked on the bar to get the attention of one of the presumably illegal aliens, and I said, "Hey, excuse me, you got two TVs with sports on, soccer, of course, because it's the fundamental transformation of America." I said, "Could you please turn one of those TVs to a news channel?" And the two gentlemen behind the bar looked a bit confused, like, but quick draw, it is the soccer game, And I said, kind of quietly, I said, Trump has been shot. And the two Spanish-speaking gentlemen behind the bar appeared alarmed, genuinely shocked and appalled. And just to my right at the bar there was a white Anglo-European, obviously Democrat man. You know how you can tell by looking at him. And he was sitting at the bar by himself looking at his phone because he has no friends, because nobody likes him. And he's looking at his phone. He said, "Yeah, I've been watching it." And I looked at him like, "Sir, do you have any information?" And he said, grudgingly and bitterly, he said, "It looks like he's okay. It looks like he's okay." That's what he said. So I shot him, and then moved on. Okay, I didn't really, just kidding. Nor did I want to. I just, I said, and the gentlemen were fumbling about trying to figure out how to work a remote control. I said, "Why don't I get my check?" And I got my check. My best girl and I headed out. We had hiked down there, so walked up to get a cab. We were going to hike back, but now we wanted to get back home real quick. So grabbed a taxi cab, a rare thing in Washington, D.C. these days, thanks to Uber wiping out the cab industry. And we hopped in a cab, made our way back home, where I've got a television, a Jumbotron. It's huge, and it's got DVR, and I can rewind and freeze frame and change channel, record multiple channels at the same time because of the miracle of the digital video recorder.
I thought the patriarchy.
The digital video recorder is definitely as a result of the patriarchy. We can thank the patriarchy for the DVR and for television and electricity and for big screen TVs. You're welcome. You're welcome, honestly. And amazing stuff. Now, I want to tell you the story because it might sound a little wacky. I didn't talk about it here on the radio because it was something I was sort of avoiding talking about. The security threats to President Trump have been a topic of discussion, and I've talked about that reality a number of times here, and it's we always knew it was very real. And let me say that it's not over now. It's not over now. It's not as though, that's, check that box, we can move on now. Because if you're on the president's Secret Service detail, the former president's Secret Service detail, Secret Service calls him F. POTUS, former president of the United States. And they have the F. POTUS security detail, and there are a lot of questions about the Secret Service, and I have maybe a couple of answers to that today, but to some of the questions, but they're going to be a congressional inquiry, as they say, and that I believe is scheduled to begin a week from today. Why not this week? Nobody knows. It's Congress. They got to take their time. And so they're supposed to have the head of the Secret Service who puts diversity, equity, and inclusion above all else. And do you see the lady agent trying to get her pistol back in her holster and couldn't do it again and again? She's a lady agent, and I'm sure she's great agent, just couldn't find her holster that one time or several times. But setting that aside. All right, back to this story, because it was 3 weeks ago to 1 month ago. 3 weeks to 1 month. I didn't note it on my calendar or anything, but I woke up at 5:30 in the morning to a dream, and my dream was that President Trump had been shot and that he survived. And I told my best girl about the dream. It was very vivid. And honestly, I went in, I do my television show on Newsmax TV. And each day, normally, we have a Zoom call with our great producers in New York, wonderful people, and a couple of people in Washington, plus myself, in a conference room in the big screen TV. And we have a Zoom call with normally 3 people on the New York end. And I, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, during the Zoom call, I said, kind of reluctantly, I said, I want to tell you about the dream I had this morning, because this morning I woke up to a dream that President Trump had been shot and he survived. And I said, now, in my dream, I was not there. I was not present. I was not at the event. I, in my dream, learned about it from news reports and heard that the president had been shot, and then heard that he survived. Now I'm not what is it? Nostradamus, Christodamus. One of the funny producers in New York called me Christodamus on Saturday because I had seen the future or something. But that's not normally. I'm not Gene Dixon. I don't normally have dreams that foresee the future. And honestly, I don't think it was a psychic revelation. I think it was just something that had been on my mind and that I had been concerned about President Trump's security and safety and the threats because of things like the soundbite that we opened with, and that is, of course, Joe Scarborough saying that he's Hitler. And you got everybody in the media peddling this Democrat Party line that is the end of democracy, and if he wins, it will be the end of our democratic institutions. This insane, hyperbolic rhetoric, this incendiary rhetoric that demonizes and vilifies with the most absurd terms, right? And you saw there's a Democrat Congressman, Benny Thompson, who had a staffer who posted online, target practice, which was the response of a lot of bloodthirsty Democrats who are so filled with hate and rancor, in particular when it comes to Donald Trump, but not exclusively when it comes to Donald Trump. They're very big on hatred, and they peddle hate. They spread hate, venom. They're mean and nasty, and they spread this stuff. And therefore, and honestly, my best girl and I had a conversation last week when we were out walking about, and the conversation was, one element of the conversation, I can't do the whole thing, but the one element of the conversation was that it's almost surprising that nobody's taken a shot at Donald Trump yet. And I said this line, I said, if and when that happens, it will be the least surprising thing that will happen that day. Because I'm not surprised. Now, because of the venom that the Democrat Party has peddled and spread and marketed so very effectively, and the hatred and the anger and the bitterness, and then all the violence. They've normalized political violence with hundreds and hundreds of riots and looting and attacking the police and burning police cars. And there are a couple of tweets that we sent out over the weekend. President Trump, if President Trump had not turned his head, and it's one of the things that I said immediately as soon as I saw the video, I said, and here's a funny thing, if you're a man, and I assume if you're a woman too, but I'm not a woman, so I can't say for sure. Hey, wait, now I'm a woman. Now I can say for sure. When you stand up and put your hands like you're at a podium, when you turn your head to the right, you automatically and involuntarily lean forward about 2 inches. And President Trump turned his head to the right. And had he not turned his head to the right, I think that because it causes you to lean forward just a little bit, I think that Saturday would have produced a new Zapruder film. Abraham Zapruder made the film of John F. Kennedy driving through Dealey Plaza, 1963. And honestly, it was this close to being a recreation of the Zapruder film. I'm holding my right index finger less than 1 inch over my right thumb. It was this close to being an assassination of Donald Trump. Now, the 20-year-old who fired the shots was then shot and killed, one kill by the Secret Service counter sniper. There were 2 counter snipers, the CS guys on the roof. And there are lots of questions about, well, whether we're looking over there earlier and didn't they see him? And I've got an answer or two when it comes to some of that, because I talk to people and I try to find things out. But there is a lot going on here. There are a lot of moving parts, and there must be obviously an investigation into how this happened. It looked like the building where the gunman was positioned. I don't like shooter. Shooter is like too. I think that's that you get those at a sports bar, and shooters. There are lots of different shooters, but I consider these people to be gunmen or assassins. And look, the Democrats, they fielded the Bernie Sanders volunteer James Hodgkinson, who shot Congressman Steve Scalise, wanted to wipe out the entire Republican baseball team. It was an attempted mass political assassination. By the way, the shooting on Saturday was a mass shooting. 4 people were shot by this gunman. The news media want to tell you over and over again, he was a registered Republican. He was a registered Republican. I have an explanation for that, too. He also gave money at the age of 17 to a radical left-wing extremist group called Act Blue. Act Blue. He gave $15. Where does that even come from? That's pretty bizarro. And they say, yeah, but he's a registered Republican. I'm like, listen, he's a Democrat. Here's how I know. He gave money to Act Blue as a teenager, which is left wing up the yin-yang, right? Then you say that he registered as a Republican. I happen to follow the news, unlike George Stephanopoulos and everybody else apparently in the news business. The Democrats for years have been pushing what they call crossover voting. That is to say, you, as a radical left-wing extremist Trump hater, you register as a Republican and you vote in the Republican primary and you vote for the anti-Trump candidate and you monkey wrench the system, right, as a verb. And so there are a lot of, by the tens of thousands, nay, hundreds of thousands, Democrats register as Republicans so they can corrupt our democracy is really what it's all about. So they can tamper with our democracy. And so this guy did register as a Republican, but I'm going to go ahead and bet $1 that when and apparently he has no social media profile. And his high school classmates, he just graduated a couple years ago, only 20 years old now. Well, now he's dead. He's not going to be 21 because Secret Service counter sniper, 1 shot, 1 kill. And but shot it a little late, perhaps, and that will be investigated. But nevertheless, a lot to talk about. And the bloodthirsty Democrat ghouls, they put James Hodgkinson into such a fit of rage that he showed up with a Chinese communist military-style rifle and shot Congressman Steve Scalise. That was a suicide attack. And this attack on Saturday was a suicide attack, too. Another reason that it's clear that he's a Democrat. I'm sorry he didn't self-immolate. That's my preferred Democrat suicide method. But it was a suicide attack and it was a mass shooting, and President Trump was shot and barely survived. The circumstances are extraordinary, perhaps divine providence. And, they had an assassin show up at Brett Kavanaugh's house because of the hate they spread. He wanted to murder 3 Supreme Court justices. And now President Trump has been shot by a would-be assassin. One man, a firefighter, murdered by the psycho who gave money to Act Blue. And it's like, no, he's a registered Republican. No, you know what? We took away his registered Republican card when he shot President Trump. He's definitely a Democrat. He's not. But the news media, they're going to use that to muddy the waters. And I have the news stories on the Democrats promoting crossover voting so that you can corrupt our democracy, our democratic systems, because they had to destroy our democracy in order to save it. Okay, the Democrats, and that includes the media, being mental about this whole thing in myriad ways, and I will get into some of them, but it's only a 3-hour show. Let's go to the telephones, Michael. Let's go to line 4, Robin, calling from Georgia. Robin, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Yes, Chris, I've been calling you for years. I'm glad you got me in. I don't really believe it. I'm really surprised. But anyway, I'm going to go quickly. He was a registered Republican. However, his dad is should be charged with assassination attempt for getting him the rifle. There was no reason for him to get the child a rifle because they only use for to kill people. So he wasn't going hunting or anything like that. So he needed to be charged also for the assassination attempt. But he was a registered Republican who knew better than to pick Trump as far as the top of the election chart. And so he decided to take Trump out as far as being the top of the election. Well, you let me talk. You go in. I'm being kind of scared of that.
Well, you're a lifelong Democrat, right, Robin?
Yes.
All right, and you believe that he wanted to assassinate Trump for what reason?
For the reason that he was the top of the Republican Party, and being a Republican, he knew that it needed a change, and he wanted to take upon himself to make that change by assassinating Trump.
Okay, well, and I got to tell you, Robin, I mean, he gave money to Act Blue, and he shot President Trump in the head. I don't think that makes him a Republican. Now, a major talking point for the Democrat Party is that the would-be assassin was a registered Republican, 20 years old, until he was shot in the head and killed by a counter-sniper, Federal Secret Service, U.S. Secret Service counter-sniper. And nice shot. You've probably seen the pictures. I got the pictures very quickly of the dead guy on the roof of the building from which he fired at President Trump and shot President Trump and shot 3 other people, making it officially a mass shooting. The Democrat Party, with all of their riots, where at least 2, probably 3 dozen people were killed in their riots. They injured more than 2,000 police officers. They burned police cars, police stations, courthouses, businesses. Looting became normal. The Democrat Party is a violent gang of rabble. They inspired a lunatic to travel to Washington, D.C. to murder Brett Kavanaugh, arrested outside of Brett Kavanaugh's house with a gun, with burglary tools, kidnapping tools. He had a hit list of 3 Supreme Court justices because the Democrats inspire a lot of hatred. And let's get to this registered Republican thing, because unlike George Stephanopoulos and Martha Raddatz, to name just a couple, I have an actual memory when it comes to news stories and so on. But the ABC News headline, for example, suspect in Trump assassination attempt, which the news media, for the most part, did not want to call it for the longest time. And I'll get into some of the headlines and some of the horrible, horrific, tragic, filthy, corrupt, dishonest news media reporting on the attempted assassination of President Trump, where the news media just made things up out of whole cloth right away. Oh, it wasn't even a bullet. It was the bullet hit the teleprompter plate, and a shard from the teleprompter nicked him, and it wasn't a bullet at all. And all you had to do was look at the video and see that the two teleprompter panels were intact, no holes through them, not cracked, not broken, all in one piece. And it was pure fiction, but they peddled that for hours on end. Pretty amazing stuff. And the Democrat media pretending that that they've got their talking point, and it is that he is a registered Republican. Therefore, I don't know what you're supposed to conclude from that, that it's a Republican on Republican violence or something. ABC News headline, suspect in Trump assassination attempt had registered as Republican, but motive unknown. The motive is that he hated President Trump, and his goal was to kill President Trump. Who hates President Trump? Registered Republicans? Interesting. Well, again, let's get back to this memory thing, because the Associated Press had a story on an interesting topic, and this story is from 2022. Steve Peoples and Aaron Kessler typed it up on behalf of the Democrat Party from May 31st of 2022. The headline is, some Democrats voting in GOP primaries to block Trump picks. The Associated Press was very happy about this, and they, in the story, Dateline is Washington, D.C., Diane Murray struggled with her decision all the way up to Election Day. But when the time came, the 54-year-old Georgia Democrat cast a ballot in last week's Republican primary for Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. While state law allowed her to participate in either party's primary, she said it felt like a violation of her core values. Well, you're a Democrat, you have no core values. To vote for the Republican, but it had to be done, she decided, to prevent a Donald Trump-backed election denier, in quotation marks, from becoming the battleground state's election chief. So this is a practice that the Democrats have been pushing, peddling, promoting, advocating, and that is what they call crossover voting. And they're just fine with crossover voting. In fact, they entice crossover voting. They're big fans of crossover voting. They want Democrats, in particular in certain states, they want Democrats to vote as Republicans in order to monkey wrench the system, because they're tampering with our democracy and our democratic systems. But this is great as far as they're concerned. An Associated Press analysis of early voting 2022 of early voting records from data firm L2 found that more than 37,000 people who voted in Georgia's Democratic primary 2 years ago cast ballots in last week's Republican primary, an unusually high number of so-called crossover voters. Even taking into account the limited sample of early voters, the data reveal that crossover voters were consequential in defeating Trump's hand-picked candidates for Secretary of State, to a lesser extent, governor. Now, the Democrats have been pushing this for a long, long time. You register as a Republican when you're a radical leftist and a creep, and you want to, destroy our constitutional republic and our democratic institutions. So you register as a Republican so you can vote for the worst Republican, and they've pushed this. And if they have a Republican that they think is an extremist, or that they can label as an extremist, they want that person to be the Republican nominee, because they think that they can demonize that person. That person will then lose, and the radical left-wing anti-American Democrat will win, right? So based on early voting data alone, 37,144 former Democrats voted in the Republican primary. The total number of crossovers, including Election Day votes, set to be revealed in the coming weeks, may be even higher. Crossover voting, also known as strategic voting, is not exclusive to Georgia. All right, in this primary season, as voters across the political spectrum work to stop Trump-backed extremists from winning control of state or federal governments. I love this sentence when I read this yesterday. Wait a minute. Let me try that again, because the Associated Press wrote this. Crossover voters, also known as strategic voting, is not exclusive to Georgia this primary season, as voters across the political spectrum, no, just Democrats, work to stop Trump-backed extremists. And the Associated Press wrote that with a straight face. That's not a quote. They're just saying Trump-backed extremists are running for office, and it's winning control of state and federal governments. How many federal governments are there that we vote in? The Associated Press has got severe brain damage. This is from 2022. The phenomenon is playing out in multiple primary contests, sometimes organically and sometimes in response to a coordinated effort by Trump's opponents. All right, and then they've got a map of Georgia where they've got all these people who are crossover voters and strategic voters, and they're Democrats, they're left-wing radicals, but they register as Republicans so they can tamper with the Republican primaries. And that explains why this guy is a was before he got shot in the head and killed, was a registered Republican, because the Democrats have organized a nationwide effort to register left-wing would-be assassins and other lunatics as Republicans in order to mess with our system, because that's what they do. That's who they are. And they shoot Steve Scalise, and they stalk Supreme Court justices, and they shoot at presidents. By the way, if you go down the history of American presidents that have been shot and or shot at, there is a conspicuous consistency in the history of political violence in the United States of America, and its name is the Democrat Party. While Trump railed against the practice of crossover voting, this weekend, this is from 2022, there's nothing inherently wrong with crossover voting, the Associated Press wrote. Dozens of states make it legal and easy for voters to participate in either party's primary. In the state of Pennsylvania, where this creep lived, he registered as a Republican because you cannot cross over. You have to register as the party whose primary you want to vote in, right? Obviously, in the general election, you can vote for whoever you want. But in Pennsylvania, you have to register as with the party that you intend to vote in their primary. And so he registered as a Republican, I am going to conclude, because he, like so many Democrats, wanted to tamper with democracy. And then he shot President Trump in the head and was this close to successfully assassinating him and creating the new Zapruder film, which fortunately did not happen. And the Associated Press says there are several isolated incidents of both parties engaging in strategic voting over the years. Still, Trump warned conservatives about crossover voting while campaigning in Wyoming, another state where the former president's opponents are calling on Democrats to intervene, this time to help save Representative Liz Cheney, a Trump-backed primary challenger. There was a Trump-backed primary challenger, and the Democrats said, oh, no, we've got to save Liz Cheney. So they registered as Republicans and went out to vote for Liz Cheney because, and in Georgia, they're doing the same. And these are organized, orchestrated efforts by the Democrats to register Democrats as Republicans, to tamper with our entire system, to corrupt our system, because they're filthy corruptniks, and that's their thing. President Trump told Wyoming supporters, don't let the Democrats do what they did in another state last week, talking about Georgia, when you allowed Democrats to vote in a Republican primary. Now, while the practice has Trump's attention, Now, so I wanted to grab those for you, and I've got a couple of other stories on this too, because this whole crossover voting thing is a Democrat trick. And now we see one of their crossover voters shot President Trump in the head on Saturday and darn near assassinated him. But it gives all the fake news media the opportunity to just say, oh, he's a registered Republican. And that's the end of the discussion as far as their tiny little corrupt brains are concerned. Newsweek magazine from December 8th of 2023, less than a year ago. Democrats' bold strategy could upend GOP primaries, is the headline. Gosh, I wonder what this is about. So over the first few months of 2024, that's this year, Democrats will vote in a number of state primaries across the country to have their say on who might be a presidential candidate in the 2024 election. While the majority will vote in their own party primaries, some plan to register as Republicans and vote in GOP primaries instead. Newsweek magazine, December of last year, December of 2023, talking about how they're going to cross over. The practice, sometimes known as crossover voting or cross voting, allows voters to opt for a rival they want a Democrat candidate to face in an election, or back a more palatable Republican in seats Democrats have had a little chance of winning. So the Democrats do this. Now let's go to, and that to me explains why this creep was registered as a Republican. It's part of the Democrat dirty trick machine and our fake lying media. Well, you know. And why would anyone shoot at President Trump? Well, on MSNBC, they have a presidential historian named Michael Beschloss who comes on and says things like this about Trump Republicans.
What was at stake tonight and this week was the fact whether we will be a democracy in the future, whether our children will be arrested and conceivably killed. We're on the edge of a brutal authoritarian system, and it could be a week away.
That's right. If Republicans take control of the House and the Senate, your children will be arrested and killed. Your children will be killed because they're in, and that causes people who are on the edge to go completely crazy. Democrat Congressman Dan Goldman, also on DNC TV.
That man cannot see public office again.
Trump.
He is not only unfit, he is destructive to our democracy, and he has to be eliminated.
He has to be eliminated, says the congressman. Madonna is a songstress of sorts, and she's from New Jersey.
Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I am outraged. Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
She's thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House. Maxine Waters is a Democrat congresswoman who has a lot of trouble with her hair.
With this kind of inspiration, I will go and take Trump out tonight.
She's going to go take him out tonight, and the crowd goes wild. And then they all killed each other. It was quite tragic. It was like Jonestown, but funnier. Rick Wilson talking about, and he's a Politico and a fundraiser type.
The donor class can't just sit back on the sidelines and say, oh, well, don't worry, this will all work itself out. They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
They're going to have to go out and put a bullet in this overheated rhetoric, James Carville.
President Biden is not the best attack politician I've ever seen in my life, and I'll leave it at that. But there are a lot of people to do what I call, quote, the wet work, unquote. Yes, a CIA term, take a guy out. But he doesn't need to do the wet work. People like me and other groups in the party need to do that. He's not very good at it.
Historian Douglas Brinkley, is people considered to be scholars.
He's been dabbling in Adolf Hitler his whole life, keeps Hitler's speeches at a bedside. Mein Kampf seems to be the book that's inspired.
All
Trump
made up.
Most.
Douglas Brinkley pulling stuff out of his dark and remote location. ABC News anchor woman David Muir.
We turn now to the race for the White House and former President Trump campaigning in New Hampshire, again using language echoing Hitler. Tonight, his Republican rivals have been forced to address this, the words being condemned as very dangerous, given how they were used in recent history.
Yeah, sure. That's no, this is the standard rhetoric. They've made this normal. Whoopi Goldberg, ironically named.
I'm going to be, on day one, I'm going to be a dictator. Who says it to you, tells you, I'm going to put you people away. I'm going to take all the journalists. I'm going to take all the gay folks. I'm going to move you all around and disappear you. If that's the country you want, you know who to vote for. If that's not the country you want, you have to make a decision.
We'll have to find out if this guy was gay. Yeah, the whoopies, they're going to round up all the gay people because the guy who grew up in Queens, New York, and hung out with the Clintons and Oprah. What are you implying about Hillary? Well, I'm just basing that on what Bill said about Hillary, but that's the standard rhetoric and then he's shot, and the Democrats can't wait to say, oh, it's a registered Republican that shot him. First they said he wasn't shot at all, and that he ducked and put fake blood, and it's all staged. And then other Democrats, including on Capitol Hill, recommending more target practice so you don't miss next time. In fact, that was trending on Twitter on Saturday because Democrats were upset that he wasn't killed. They started the first Civil War, the Democrats did, firing on Fort Sumter. This is not a quality group of people. And the front page of the... wow, I've got so little time. Well, let's go to Sonny calling from Alexandria, Virginia. And I'm sorry, Sonny, I don't have a ton of time, but I wanted to give it to you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And first of all, I want to say your dream was providential. And what we witnessed on Saturday was nothing short of a miracle. And we, once again, were reaffirmed that God's hand is on our President Trump and our prayers are heard. And I do believe that more now than ever that President Trump will return to the White House in 2025.
Well, I believe it more than ever as well. I really do. And as for it being providential, a friend of mine wrote a piece on that very thing that I hope to share today. And yeah, my dream was, I shared it with a number of people the day that I had the dream, my best girl and others, and it did kind of come to pass.